Thank you, Gaurav, for inviting me here. The only complaint I have against Gaurav is that he served a very sumptuous lunch. I think we just forced a large number of people to sort of go for their afternoon naps after lunch. So, I've been asked to speak on radical ideas on the line of actual control. And if some soldiers and officers who are serving on the LAC hear this, they say, all these radical ideas are only given in air-conditioned rooms sitting at Delhi. So not so much radical ideas. I think what I'm going to talk about today is how we can better improve our management of the LAC. And so I will take that as a focus. But before I come to that, so what is the major challenge that the soldiers and the officers on the LAC face? And the major challenge is actually the challenge of geography. So if you look at the line of actual control in the central and eastern sector, runs along the Himalayan watershed, which is the highest mountain range in the world. Even at Ladakh, where you actually have to cross the Himalayan watershed to get to eastern Ladakh, even there is a challenge because the amount of snow that dumps on the Himalayan watershed in Ladakh actually cuts off Ladakh for almost between 4 to 5 months in a year. So there are major sort of challenges, and because of that, our road construction is very limited. It has to go through narrow valleys, climbing right up from the plains to the heights on the watershed. On the other side of the LAC, you have the Tibetan Plateau, where it's much, much easier to construct roads, construct infrastructure. Just as an example, the Lhasa-Nyingchi 425-kilometer railway line was constructed in took about 6 years to construct. What we're hearing now is major highways, major railway lines that are going to come up, across the Exai Chin. So while we might do whatever we can on infrastructure development, and a lot is going on, I think the reality is that we cannot match the kind of infrastructure that the Chinese are going to be able to build in Tibet. I mean, that's the reality. We might do whatever we can. And so the problem for us is how to match that kind of mobility, how to match information gathering from the other side, because the Chinese have the ability to very quickly move forces, very quickly sidestep. And so our major challenge, frankly, lies in our ability to detect, discern the intentions of the Chinese, and to be able to react. And so these are the 2-3 areas that I'm going to talk about. The first thing we need is a very effective surveillance and intelligence architecture. Because there is a limit to how many troops you can put along the LAC. There is a minimum number that is required for sure. But it isn't as if you can just keep pumping in troops and troops along the LAC to be able to meet where the Chinese are going to come in from, how they're going to mobilize, how they're going to move. And so you need a very effective intelligence and surveillance architecture. And so what will this surveillance and architecture, for example, look like at the core level? And it needs to have 3-4 components. So you need a network of interlinked sensors. So you have ground sensors, you have acoustic sensors, magnetic sensors, along likely lines of transgression by the PLA. So that's the first requirement. There are a very dense sort of network of interlinked sensors. What you have today also, and what I'm going to talk about some aspects of technology, the technology that's available today and just sort of needs a little bit of development and then deployment. So you have something called smart dust. So these are sensor modes, 20 micrometers to a maximum of 1 millimeter size. And it's like a dust, very difficult to detect. And this is what can be deployed either aerially through helicopters or even by men. And that's quickly deployed along where you think there are routes of transgression that can come. It will be very difficult to detect these sensors and where they are. Behind them, probably what you would require is elevated platforms where you can mount your sensors, electro-optical radars. Now, these could be physical elevated platform, or you can have balloons, and that's also been tried out. Elevated balloons, somewhat in depth from the LAC. Behind them, of course, we are all talking about drones, etc. an array of drones which can be launched very quickly to see where the transgression is, where we need to move, and how we need to get there. Connecting all this, you require a very effective communication network, and there are different sort of means of establishing these communication networks these days. There are traditional communication networks. We are also having what are called light fidelity technology today, where information is transmitted through light, and that can carry much sort of higher amount of information on that. And you need this network not to be hierarchical. It can't go from one formation to another formation. This information will come to a battalion, from battalion it goes to a brigade it goes to the division. You need a completely non-hierarchical network, and information from all these sensors actually feeding into an analysis hub. So all the information that is gathered by these sensors comes into an analysis hub, where the data is analyzed. You use artificial intelligence, and everybody's talking about how AI can be used. And the AI then decides where this information is required to be fed, which means who are the people who are going to react to this information. And that's where your analysis hub then feeds this information very quickly, whether it's to a company location, whether it's to a battalion headquarters, whether it goes to a brigade headquarters. And that kind of decision making, that very quick decision making that is required to be done, I think is only feasible if you have machine learning and you have artificial intelligence actually driving these decision making. So that's the kind of infrastructure that you will require probably at a core level: an array of sensors, an effective communication network, and then a data analysis hub, which is then feeding information down to people who are supposed to very, very quickly react to it. What about information and intelligence in greater depth? So what happens, how do we actually keep note of what is happening in Tibet, for example? How do we know where there is a large movement of troops that is taking place from China across Xinjiang and across Tibet and coming close to the LAC? And of course, you have your traditional means of surveillance, which is your aircraft, which carry out photography. You have your satellites, which give you visual pictures at various times. But I think we need to start looking a little beyond these traditional means. And let me give you one or two examples. So you have today around the world satellites which are tracking air pollution globally. Now imagine a convoy of 1,000, 1,500 vehicles traveling on a road in Tibet, where the air pollution is very low. You're going to have a high density of air pollution along those routes. So is there some way that you can utilize this information? Can you have satellites which is tracking this? Because that's a clear giveaway that a very large movement of troops has taken place. Let me give you one more example, and I don't know how practical it is and whether it can be applied, but just as an example, how does Google Map track traffic? It's basically the number of telephones that are moving along that route, how slowly they are moving, and that's how it calculates sort of traffic density. Is there some way of applying these technologies which are today available, in addition to your traditional forms of satellite imagery, etc., to look at information which is in greater depth and which you can then utilize for making sort of analysis and assessments? And all this that you are having, and again, I think we need to go back to the AI and look at some predictive tools to say, look, this is the kind of movement that has happened. These are the indicators. What does it predict for you? For example, 2020, since January 2020, we knew that there is a large movement of PLA soldiers that has taken place and has gone to their traditional exercise areas. That information was known. It was being reported by newspapers as early as January 2020. I think what we did not know was thereafter what. And therefore, if we can make use of artificial intelligence to look at various indicators and make sort of predictions about what these indicators mean, how could, for example, the PLA thereafter react, these are some of these things that we need to look at if we want to really strengthen our surveillance and architecture grid. Once you've got the information, you need to be able to rapidly react to that along the LAC. And so what is the kind of equipment that is required? I'm not saying this is the only equipment required. What I'm trying to suggest to you is that in addition to your traditional military hardware, what is the kind of military equipment that is required for soldiers to be able to react very quickly to any kind of situation? And obviously the first thing is we need more helicopters. You cannot just keep having, as I said, keep pumping in troops all along the LAC every meter, every 100 meters to say that we require these so that we can react. I mean, there's going to be a limitation to numbers. So obviously you need helicopters. You need all-terrain vehicles. We've been experimenting with these from when I was there in 2015. We were carrying out trials of all-terrain vehicles. I was asking somebody today in the audience, and he said, it's 2023, we are still carrying out trials of all-terrain vehicles. I mean, it's something that we know is needed very quickly. Our ability to move in small teams is extremely, extremely important. And for that, you require all-terrain vehicles. You don't need thousands of soldiers to move. When you find that something is happening, a small group of soldiers can immediately sort of and very quickly react. So I think all-terrain vehicles is an absolutely, absolutely essential requirement. It is my personal view, and the DRDO chief is not here, thank God, that light tanks is going to be a waste in Ladakh. You don't need heavy equipment. The infrastructure that you'll need to create, the ability of light tanks to move, the fact that what we've seen in Ukraine would, 5 small team ATVs mounted with advanced anti-tank missiles be a better bet in Ladakh rather than moving in tanks. You will also require autonomous vehicles. You cannot go everywhere every time on your own. And so, and I'm saying these are technologies that are not something that are 50 years, 100 years into the future. You already have self-driving cars, etc. You need autonomous vehicles. You need adaptive camouflage in order to hide yourself where you're moving, so that you cannot be picked up. One very sorely needed thing is energy efficient technologies. A big problem that we practically faced was you have all this equipment where you require battery charging. There is no electricity in the forward areas. You are completely reliant on generators. How long are you going to run the generators just for charging your radio set batteries, your night vision device batteries, your radar batteries? So you need energy efficient technology very, very badly along the LAC. And you need advanced technology in infrastructure building. Our road building, our construction that we do for habitat, for defense works, takes enormous amount of time. And I think somewhere where people can step in with technology that can help build your infrastructure quickly is an absolutely essential requirement. And my last point is, you need to, these high altitude areas take enormous toll on the human being. It's extremely difficult to operate at full efficiency in these high altitude areas, and for those of you who served there would know this. So you need something to empower the individual. And again, these are not some things that are not available. You need wearable devices that can map your health parameters. You need telemedicine. This is nothing new. The watch I'm wearing can do much of it. It's not very costly, and I think every individual soldier needs to have a wearable equipment that can measure his health, and the ability automatically for that information to be fed in somewhere into a telemedicine system where it goes to a doctor who can then sort of give advice. You need to start looking at exoskeletons, and again, this is not something that's not available today. It is available. You need lightweight armor. You need augmented reality systems so that there is greater awareness among soldiers of what is happening. And my last point, I think okay, maybe I have a couple of minutes, is that we need to speed up our procurement processes. If we are actually going to look at equipping our soldiers well, getting things going, I've just given you the example of how the all-terrain vehicles, the last 7, 8 years is what we've been testing and trying it out. And so we need procurement processes that are different, that are quicker, that are faster than what we currently have. So the U.S. Air Force, when the chief was asked, what are the areas that you are going to adopt artificial intelligence, and he said, my priority areas procurement processes, of how we can use AI to actually make our procurement processes better. And as we look at adoption of high technology into the military, and again, this is something that everybody's talked about, please understand, if your procurement process is going to take 5 years, that technology is going to be completely outdated by the time it comes into service. So there is a need to start seriously looking at how we procure our equipment and how quickly sort of we can do that. So just to sort of sum it up, I think, as I said, there are really no great radical ideas. Just some ways in which technology that is already existing today can be applied, and applied to improve our intelligence networks, improve our surveillance systems, looking at intelligence in depth areas, getting predictive tools, the kind of equipment that we need to both operate efficiently and to be able to empower our soldiers. I think these are some of the ideas that I had. I mean, there could be hundreds more like this. So thank you very much for a very patient listening. Thank you.